I talked about this last year. Last year we talked about cultural cultural competence, right? And like pharmacy around the world and how you approach pharmacy working in different spaces. And, you know, Judy's like, do you want to come back? And I said, I don't know what I'm going to talk about. But then I started thinking about the thing that I'm most passionate about, which is the mountains. And generally I relate my life to the mountains and mountaineering. And there's a lot of parallels between, you know, mountaineering and your career. So I'm hoping to go through an activity today that is basically around this theme of you don't get stronger at base camp. So I'm going to pass these out. Actually, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is a little worksheet. Those online, there'll be prompts that you can maybe do when you're on the computer, I guess. Here's that. On the other side. Hi, welcome. Thank you. So there's like 50 of them. You can collect the extras at the end. Sure. And no, don't be cautious. Double sign it. Don't read it all at once. We're gonna walk through it together, I promise. All right. Does anyone know what mountain this is?
You in here?
Heck yeah. Are you from Seattle? No, you're just a mountaineer and your side hustle as well. Yes, exactly. This is Mount Rainier and base camp, right? So what is base camp? So base camp is generally the staging area when you're climbing a mountain. It's where you sleep, you eat, you climatize before you go up the summit. So on Everest, base camp generally sits around like 17,000 feet. Rainier, depending on where you're camping, it can be around 9,000 to 10,000 feet. And it's a really important place, right? You're there because you're preparing for your summit day. So you can't really skip it. But you don't necessarily want to stay there, right? Because you can actually de-acclimatize if you stay at base camp too long. And there is so much purpose to being at the base camp because, again, you're preparing to go up, but your body can de-acclimatize and the preparation can start working against you. So why I'm saying this about base camp is I think that there's a major parallel between base camp and your career. Like sometimes people end up staying in the same place and they don't make that forward step to attempt the summit. And they're like, why am I not getting stronger? Why am I not getting paid more money? Why am I not being more interested in what I'm doing? And it's because there's a lack of that first step. So a lot of what we'll talk about today is how to make that first step. So she gave a lovely introduction, so I feel like I don't really have to introduce myself too much. But I do work at the University of Colorado. I'm originally from Dallas, so anyway, do we have any Texas people in here? Yes, okay. So I am a Texan, but I pretend to be a Coloradan, so I'm happy to be back in Texas. I'm like sweating like I grew up here,
Great memories, I hope.
Yeah, great memories, love it, love a good howdy. Again, I was saying when I was walking in here, I was downtown and there was like policemen on cowboys, and I'm like, God, I love this state so much. Or policemen on horses, sorry, who looked like cowboys. Okay, anyways, so yeah, done some of these mountains, and I tell you that because it's the parallel between like how I do a hobby and how I'm living my career. And it's important to understand, the skills that are required to push further and upward, which are parallel to mountaineering. So here's a route for fun. So when you're climbing Rainier specifically, there's multiple ways you can go up the mountain. The route we went is the Emmons Glacier, so it's much more technical. You start, in Colorado, we have these things called 14ers, right? So everyone's like, I'm climbing all the 14ers. And I'm like, yeah, but you're starting at like 9,000 feet, right? You're only going up 5. Whereas like real mountaineering, you're starting very, very low. You're carrying all your own gear, generally around 50 to 60 pounds. You're having to make like big, elevation gains in short distances, so it's very strenuous. And then, you make your push for base camp, you come all the way back down. So again, I'm showing you that because there's a lot of preparation that goes into these mountains. You have to understand that every step is very deliberate, and the mountains don't reward confidence. They reward that preparation and the decision-making that goes in to pursuing them. So confidence is not a byproduct of action, or confidence is a byproduct of action, not the other way around. And so today we're going to learn about how to start moving. So in terms of what we're hoping to do, 3 things. First, I want you to be able to recognize when discomfort is actually a sign of growth versus when you genuinely need more training. Because sometimes those can feel identical, and most people get them wrong. Second, I want you to identify some transferable skills you've already built through your daily work that you've probably not given yourself credit for. And then third, I want to give you a framework you can actually use to take ownership of where your career goes next. So there's going to be an activity. We're having fun. This is the end of the day. We're just going to keep pushing through. Okay, so why do people get stuck? Like, why do people get stuck in their career? The first thing is generally competent people, they just reach a point where they've mastered their environment, right? Like a lot of you can probably say this. You know your workflow, you know your team, you know what to expect. And sometimes that feels good, right? Like a mastery of your environment can feel really good. But it can also start to feel like a ceiling. And most people mistake that ceiling for comfort. And it doesn't necessarily have to be. It's just more of a stagnation with the familiar environment that you're in. And there's a great author, a good book, I actually brought it, that I recommend to you all. It's called Leading Change by John Cotter. And he spent decades studying why change efforts fail. So this can be relevant to you as an individual or maybe a company that's experiencing change. He basically talks about how his first finding was that basically people don't move without urgency. It's not motivation, it's not inspiration, it's urgency. So the first thing we're going to do within this activity is to essentially be honest with yourself of where you are. So we're going to do a base camp audit. So the first section of your worksheet, go to section 1, and there's 4 statements on there. You're going to score, it's the same 4 sections for our online friends, 4 sections here. You're going to score yourself from 1 to 5. 1 means never, 5 means always. And I want you to be really honest with yourself. Giving you 30 to 60 seconds. All right, and without sharing your numbers, I want you to just think about what that score tells you. Is your number a signal that things are fine? Or is it a signal that you've been comfortable in a place that isn't actually growing you? Show of hands, how many of you gave yourself mostly 3s or below? Well, a few. Okay, we have a very highly excelling group here. So yeah, being honest about where you are is really important because if you assess where you are, you then are able to say, this is where I'm going. So that's step 1. So in terms of base camp, there's a lot of reasons why people will stay stuck in their career, stay in the same position, stay at the same pay scale, not progress forward. And it's not weakness, again, it's really that human nature because we prefer familiar discomfort over unfamiliar uncertainty. So the discomfort of being unchallenged is at least predictable, right? The discomfort of trying something new and failing, that leads to like a different kind of risk. So that's the first issue. The second one is we wait to feel ready, right? We wait for this like magical moment that like, okay, now I'm ready for the change. But that feeling of readiness is it never precedes the actual action step. So action is what's going to create the readiness. And then third, we underestimate the value of what we actually have. So we're so close to our own skill set that we stop being able to see them clearly. And I feel like this third one is really what resonates a lot with pharmacy technicians and pharmacists. Like, I mean, I will be in a room with people who have zero healthcare background and be like, yeah, you know how that drug works, right? And I'm like, wait, no, like I have a specialized knowledge, right? Being a pharmacist, y'all have a specialized knowledge being pharmacy technicians, but we forget that. We forget that skill set. So I think that's really where there's a lot of opportunity because you are more skilled than you think. And we can walk through that skill set and transfer it into a more useful opportunity. So when you're looking at this concept of reframing what you already do, this is potentially how you describe your job to someone. Again, you're all working in amazing different environments, but if we were just to look at community pharmacy, you could say, I fill prescriptions, I answer phones, I deal with insurance, strong emphasis on deal, and that could be tasks-based understanding of what you do. But what if we were to reframe it to being, instead of dealing with insurance, that's system navigation. You are moving through bureaucratic complexity under time pressure to get a patient what they need. That's a very transferable skill in operations, management, healthcare administration, and a dozen of other settings. What about handling an angry patient? That's conflict management, de-escalation, emotional regulation, under pressure. And all of these are leadership competencies that organizations are paying today to develop in people. So it's important to know that no one is going to hire tasks. They're going to hire values. So it's important to say, what am I doing and how do I create value in that and then lead it into an opportunity? So here is that skill translation framework. Essentially, we're taking a task, we're turning it into a skill, a value, and then an opportunity. Here would be another example. So in my everyday work, I work a lot with prospective pharmacy students. And sometimes they'll come to me and say, like, I want to go to pharmacy school, but I don't have any pharmacy experience. And I'm like, well, go get a job. Or what have you been doing, right? Like, what have you been doing in terms of work? And sometimes they'll say something like, well, like, I wait tables at my family's restaurant, and I've done so for years. Okay, so when I'm thinking about that situation with them, what are the tasks there? They're taking orders. They're running food. They're managing a full section during a dinner rush, right? So the skill, though, is managing multiple patients. Okay, maybe not patients, customers, right? But translating that directly to, like, customers are patients. You're doing so simultaneously, managing different needs, different timelines, different levels of urgency, and you're triaging, something that you all do every single day. You're also having to learn to communicate under pressure while keeping track of dozens of moving pieces at one time. So they are doing, in a restaurant, they're gaining skills and values that can be applied to pharmacy. And it's just important to reframe for them so they understand what they're doing is actually valuable for where they want to go. And it's the same thing with you all. If you identify where you want to go, you can say, these are my skills, these are the tasks I do, these are the skills they are, this is the value, and then how it turns into the opportunity. So the next step of what we're going to do is essentially write that down. So skill translation. So I want you to take a few moments to write down one skill you do regularly. Then I want you to translate it into, one task you do regularly, translate it into a skill, then a value, and where else could this apply? So now you're starting to know what you have. Now the harder question is what you do with it, especially when doing something with it means choosing discomfort on purpose. I actually heard the other day on a podcast that people are more willing to take a 10% cut in pay before they're willing to look for a new job, like on average. I was like, wait, what? Like, you're telling me my boss can walk in the room and be like, okay, guys, everything's going great. Actually, it's not. Everyone's going to have to take a 10% pay, and everyone in the room's going to stay. And that's what's happening, because people don't want to be uncomfortable. And what I'm telling y'all to do is to choose discomfort, right? Take what you have and be willing to make the next step if you want to change the direction of your career. So everything we've talked about, recognizing stagnation, translating your skills, that's the preparation part. And now the discomfort is the actual summit attempt, right? That now we're going to start going up the mountain, because I guarantee you, the second you're putting on your crampons, you're grabbing all your stuff, you're waking up in the middle of the night, like, you know, you've slept on snow, like you've been uncomfortable, now you're about to be really uncomfortable because you're going really steep uphill for 10 hours. So let's be purposeful in how we're applying what you have to where you want to go. So growth versus skills. I think it's important that you're able to understand, like, what is really the difference. When you're in a hard situation, when you feel incompetent or uncertain, or like you don't know where you belong, there can be something where you can ask yourself, is this growth or is this a skill gap? Because sometimes they can feel the same, but they require completely different responses. So growth looks like this. You are uncomfortable, but you're improving. You get feedback, and then you translate that into change. You progress even if you make progress even if it's slow, and you need exposure, maybe more reps, more experience, more time. That's growth. A skill gap is more like you're repeating the same mistakes. You're not improving despite effort. Feedback doesn't translate. And you need, at this point, more time, more training, targeted development. So when you think about a challenge you're facing right now, I want you to put it in one of those two columns in your head. Is this a growth, or is this a growth opportunity, or is this a skill gap? Because not all discomfort is technically growth, but most growth can feel uncomfortable. So when you go to section 3 on your worksheet, think of a real challenge you're facing right now. Run it through the checklist and be honest with yourself about which column it lands in. All right, we're making our way up this climb. So there's this concept of a tree line when you're hiking, especially at elevation. It's not a metaphor, it's literally science. So at a certain elevation, it becomes too cold, too windy, and the growing season is too short for the trees to survive. So they just stop. There's just no more trees. And you can physically see it, right? You look up at the mountain and there's no more trees above a certain line, and that's an elevation line. And once you move past that, while hiking, you become very exposed because you no longer have the shade, right? You no longer have this windbreak, and there's nothing between you and the mountain. And so you feel that change immediately, and it's really something that is a point that you can recognize in your career. You can recognize, like, I have been comfortable, I am coming up to the tree line, and do I cross? Do I expose myself? Do I move forward with taking a risk? And maybe you're there right now. Maybe you've been there before. And it all is generally related to stepping into something new. So again, a different role, a hard conversation maybe about increasing your pay. Maybe there's a stretch assignment that they just ask you to do or that you know you should do in order to progress higher. And immediately you get these feelings of doubt, fear, instability, vulnerability. And then generally what happens next is we all start having this like insane inner voice, right? Where you're like, I'm not good at this. I can't do this. I don't belong. I'm not ready. And a lot of that inner voice can make or break that continuation of moving forward, right? You sometimes want to run back. And that's where there's a real learning curve, right? You can transfer, I am not good at this, to this is a learning opportunity. I don't belong here. What about that could be, this is an opportunity to expand my skills. Or I'm in new territory at this point, and that's okay. Sometimes, again, this idea of growth can feel like incompetence temporarily, but that's not necessarily a warning. In my opinion, I think that's a signal that you're in the right place. Again, when it comes to mountaineering, like they basically tell you, because it's a very dangerous sport, and they basically say, you want to push your line. Like if my line of fear is, here, like every new climb, you want to push just a little past that line, like a little bit more uncomfortable. And then you're like, oh, this space feels kind of nice, right? And then you do another climb. Maybe it's more challenging, more dangerous. Maybe you don't have as much, support or whatever. And you push a little bit further and a little bit further and a little bit further. And then you're just capable of expanding the opportunities available to you when you're able and willing to push one step further. So that can be the reframe as well, is taking this feeling of uncertainty and seeing it as growth and then pushing forward. So that's the moving beyond the base camp mentality, right? We don't want, our careers just don't change because of insight. They change because of that action and that willingness to move a step further. Okay, so I want to walk through this career framework. This is, I just lost where I am. Okay, so there's a 5-step framework. Again, this is a lot from this John Cotter book that helps you move in this idea of change. So the first thing is awareness, right? So where am I actually? Where are you actually? Not where you wish you want to be, but not where you maybe planned or hoped you would be at this time, but where are you right now? So that's that base camp audit. We just did that. The translation, right? That was step 2. So what skills do you actually have? You have a lot more than you think, and I encourage you after these few days of being here to really take the time and assess what you actually have right now. Then you make a decision. You say, what direction do you want? And I would encourage you to say not what's safe and not what's expected of you, but like, where do you actually want to go? And then the action is going to be, what is that next step? Sometimes it's literally just one step. I was once told by a friend, we're all moving. The key is just to move forward. But sometimes, I think of moving forward, and I'm like, I am moving actively towards this cliff. Or maybe you're part of an organization, and you're like, the decision we were making are going to take us. And we're just like, we're moving forward, though, right? We're moving forward. But sometimes the best action you can do is be like, I'm just going to stop, and I'm going to 180 turn around, take a step, and that's still moving forward too, right? So there's also the value of in this assessment process within your career saying, okay, I was supposed to go this way, or I thought I was going to go this way, but not working at all. So I'm going to stop and I'm going to turn around and I'm going to take a step forward in another direction. And that's completely okay because we want to continue to move forward. We want to continue to move upward in our career, but sometimes you have to redirect. And the last is ownership. When I was making these slides, I remember hearing my mother in my head who would be like, you're the only one that can take care of you. And that is so honest, right? Whether it's how you take care of your physical health or what you do within your job, HR is not going to say, hey, we want to give you more money today, right? Your boss, is going to say, I want to give you more work, not necessarily a promotion. and maybe do a performance review, and it leads to absolutely nothing, right? So you have to take ownership. That's why this is so important today and what you do from today moving forward, because you are responsible for your career and like the direction you go today. And when it comes to, again, the summiting and the mountaineering mentality, like you don't just summit by accident, right? You can't just like wake up one morning and be like, I'm going to summit Rainier. Like, not going to happen. I can tell you that from personal experience. Every climb I have done, several people go in saying, I'm going to summit. We all like take this group photo at the bottom, and then, you know, they don't, right? Whether they make a silly mistake. On Rainier, we had a guy who left his helmet with all of our sharp things because you can't bring them into your tent, but he didn't lock it down, and it was super windy that night, and his helmet literally flew off, like flew away in the middle of the night, and boom, your summit attempt is dead because it's unsafe, right? He can't go up because of mountain fall, of rock fall. Details, right? So it's preparedness. You have to be ready, but you also have to pay attention to how you are going about the process of summiting, training, timing, commitment, patience, which I am horrible at, ask my significant other, dedication, mental strength, and awareness. And all of this is so relevant to how you approach what you're doing within your career, and you have to approach these like same trainings to make sure that you're getting to where you want to go. And Cotter's research found that small early wins are what build momentum for forward change. So it's not motivation, it's not inspiration, it's those wins. So I think what's really important, again, is to identify one specific step this week that can be your first win, so we can make it real. So that's section 4. You're going to look at section 4 on your worksheet and decide what is your next move. One opportunity you've been thinking about, one reason you haven't acted, and then one step you can take this week to get there. And when I mean like be specific, it's not, oh, I'm going to message one person by Friday, or I'm going to network more. Specific is I'm going to message this person by Friday to seek out whatever opportunity. Or it's not like I'm going to look into more certification programs or, you know, something very general. It's you're going to go to the PTCB website and download eligibility requirements tonight for whatever it is. So write down one step you can take this week. Cool. And I love this quote. So if nothing changes, you end up getting there, right? Like if you do nothing differently, do you think you actually get where you want to go? And there's a really cool movie, 180 Degrees South. It kind of goes through the journey of the Patagonia North Face founders. And the guy who is kind of narrating the film says something to the effect of like, he's making a decision in his life, right? He can continue on this adventure of, you know, following this trek and this opportunity, or he essentially can go back. And he says, if I don't get on that boat, I know exactly what I'm going home to. If I do, my future is unwritten. And I've always loved that so much, because if we don't make any aggressive change, your life is going to be exactly the same. Your day tomorrow, when you go home, back to your comfortable bed, or whenever you're doing that, like making the same coffee or whatever, like, you know, reading the same types of books, like your life will be the same, and you will be in the same position next year at this conference as if I am here chatting. I will ask you if you don't make significant changes, right? But if you make a change, if you're willing to be uncomfortable, then your future is unwritten. And it's unwritten in a way that is like going towards the things that you want. It's that action piece that's really important. So don't sit at base camp. It's way less beautiful than the summit. You have to make those forward steps. So the last little activity, maybe, section 5. So someone did this to me last year, and I was like, whoa, this is very trippy. So because we're all kind of like living in our moments, living in our day. Maybe you think about like what's next week, or maybe 6 months or a year. But like if you're like thinking about 10 years from now, maybe you think about how old you're going to be. That's when it gets really scary. Thinking and stopping, and maybe we all close our eyes. Okay? Think about yourself 10 years from now. Where are you working? What does your typical day look like? Maybe what does financial stability feel like? Not in numbers, but a physical feeling in your body. And I want you to answer those questions honestly with yourself. And then you can open your eyes and write down in section 5 what that is. In 10 years, if everything is exactly what you want, what do you look like? Where are you working? What does your day look like? What does financial stability feel like? And then my favorite question is, if you don't change anything, do you end up there? And I encourage you to take that activity and maybe readdress it in a few days or in a month. I have mine typed up, and I actually have it on a whiteboard like right next to me, and I look at it regularly. And I even went so far, because I'm a huge nerd, and I like wrote out the years, so 2026 to 2036, and I said, what are the ticks? Like, what are the things that I want to accomplish in those years? So I'm seeing it when I'm working. I see it next to me, like, okay, like at this point I want to do this. At this point I want to do this. At this point, like, I expect this. And, you know, readdressing it is important as well. Like, maybe I wanted A and I now wanted B, but like having it visible to you is what really creates that accountability to yourself. So I encourage you to do something like that, whether it's create your own sheet or make it like big next to you or whatever. Because this is why. So why did I put a red Corvette there? There's actually a theory. It's essentially called, there's a structure in your brain called the reticular activation system, RAS. And think of it as your like brain's gatekeeper. Your brain is taking in so much information all the time and every single second. And it's basically trying to decide, the RAS system decides what gets through to your conscious awareness and what gets filtered out as background noise. So why does this matter? So your RAS system takes its cues from what you tell it is important. So what you focus on, what you repeat, and what you set as a priority. That's the signals it scans for. So when people talk about intention setting or manifestation, it is like a real science-based process that's happening in your brain. You're not just having these opportunities happen out of thin air. The opportunities were probably already in front of you, but you're getting clear on what you want, and then you start to repeat it to yourself, and you start to visually see it. So maybe if you say here, like, I want X opportunity, you start noticing job postings that you potentially would have scrolled right past. Or you maybe remember a conversation with someone that works in that industry that now suddenly feels very relevant. Or you maybe follow up on, and then you follow up on that, connection. And that's not because the world just like, oh, like the world's happening to me. No, it's because you're creating the filter in your brain to make it happen. So That's why what you say to yourself really matters. So it's not, I'm not ready. It's, I'm learning. I don't belong. I'm expanding. I can't is I haven't yet. Or I am going in blank direction. Like, you tell yourself what you want and it creates around. And it's literally a theory. That's why if you say like, oh, I want to buy a red Corvette. I actually can't stand Corvettes, but it's what I remember. Like, you will start seeing red Corvettes all across like the city. And they've been there. But now you've just started saying red Corvette. It's the same thing with the board next to you. If you're like, I want blank, like those things will come about because you're creating that filter in your brain and you're creating that intention. All right, so last but not least, we've reached the summit, we've decided what we want to do, but how do you now continue that process? So Connor's final step in any change process is anchoring the change so it doesn't fade. The descent from the summit isn't the end of the climb. Actually, a lot of people die coming down. That's just a side note. We look up the Everest stats from this year. It's generally on the descent because people get like, oh, like everything's good. I've done the thing. But that's actually when you need to like snap in the most. That's when you say, I have learned all of these things and I'm going to bring it back down and embed it into the way I'm learning, living, and working. So it's important that we now just look at the main takeaways from this, which is what you should take away from this room. First and foremost, you are not stuck, potentially under-directed, right? And that's why it's important to look at this sheet, create your own sheet, and create that direction. You're under-translating your value, right? You have all of these amazing skills and tasks that you're doing on a daily basis that jobs would thirst for. You want to go to pharmacy school, you are the person that they want in our school right now. So keep that in mind. You're welcome, see you. So you're under translating your value and you have skills that can apply far beyond the role you're currently sitting in. So advocate for yourself. And then discomfort is not failure. It's frequently the exact feeling of growth that we want you to have. So have those action steps because that is what's going to create the confidence and create the further opportunities. And lastly, like in the mountains, you really don't wait to feel ready, right? I said you don't just like show up and you're like, I'm going to do this, right? You prepare, you commit, and then you make very intentional moves. And I really hope you can see that your career is no different. With clear intention, with clear understanding of what you have and where you want to go, you absolutely can create that career for you and get to the summit and maybe do another one. So I think the last question is really worth your time, but in the sake of time, let's just write down one action you are committing to after this session today. And this is not like I'm thinking about it. Like, what are you committing to do to yourself? And I hope you take that paper with you as a contract to yourself. And a year from now, when you're back at this conference, wherever it is, you maybe still have it and say, how am I doing towards my goals? Because time is very precious and we need to live it up. And I'll take any questions, but I can say it's 3:30. You're welcome. But yeah, thank you for the opportunity, and I really.
Which one's Kilimanjaro?
No, this is all Rainier, actually.
Oh, it's all Rainier. Okay.
Yeah, this is all Rainier. I didn't do any other mountains, but this was actually flying. That is literally me taking that photo from the plane, flying to Seattle, and I was like, oh, this is a bad idea. No, it was actually very exciting, and it was beautiful. We got very lucky. Yeah, these are some examples, like major crevasses is kind of what you're going across, these like snow bridges, so that's why you're roped up together in case someone goes in. There's like a process to save them, hopefully. Yeah, that's at the bottom, like we're all like clean and excited, and then you put on 60 pounds on your back and you're like, okay, am I still excited? But yeah, it's really fun. And then the sunsets are beautiful, sunrises.
Did you camp on the mountain, or it took you a day to get to the summit?
Yeah, we camped 3 nights on the mountain. So the first night when the guy's helmet flew off, we were actually more on like a rock kind of ledge. And then the next 2 nights we had shovels. We were on the snow, so you have to like dig out where you're gonna put your tent, and then make sure it's really secure in the ground because it gets very windy. Actually, when we came up to the high camp, what's base camp, to set up our tents, we saw several tents that were in the crevasses, and I was like, ooh, that was bad. It was because the night before, like I said, it was so windy, like so windy, and the team that went up that day to attempt the summit didn't put their tents in well enough, and so they all just like flew off. So they got back from like a 10-hour summit day and then had to go like crevasse rescue their tents before they had went down. Sounds like fun, right? It's a twisted fun. Everyone does their fun. Yes.
So before your first try, what did you do to prepare
To
do a mountain climb?
yeah. Well, I mean, physically preparing, I would say, is different from mentally preparing. But I mean, I train a lot with a big pack, like 60-pound weight vest generally, and just like tons of elevation hikes. And then, yeah, you just make sure your gear's in place, and then there's like a mental process. So understanding, the weather that's going to be ahead, making sure your timing's going to be right. So the window of when you're going to start, understanding the route. There's a lot of blogs, understanding like the current conditions for every mountain. So specifically with Rainier, it was looking through those blogs and making sure that you knew, okay, like you can't necessarily go this way on the route. You need to go this way because the snow bridge has fallen or whatever it is. So yeah, there's a lot of like online nerdiness, but then the physical preparation is definitely like the nutrition, hydration, and then the training, which usually I train about 3 to 6 months ahead, depending on the mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. Well, thank you all.